Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. In this video is to bring you a closer look at the Cal Royal number SH-14026D. This is a satin chrome single acting spring hinge, full mortise, standard weight, and steel based. Let's go over what all that means. First and foremost, this is just a spring hinge, a very common piece of hardware that you're going to see installed in a variety of installations, primarily commercial installations or heavy-duty residential sorts of applications. But this is a spring hinge, and it acts to obviously close the door. It's installed in lieu of an overhead surface-mounted door closer or another type of hydraulic-style door closer. It's a spring hinge. Cal Royal has a very fine example of spring hinges. I'm partial to them. They have good quality fit and finish. They are good performing, they are reliable, they are predictable, and they're available in several different finishes as well, not only this 26D or satin chrome hinge. This is a grade 1 rated hinge. That means that it's been rated for a million cycle, a million duty cycle, so that is the highest grade rating that you'd have on a piece of hardware that it would meet that criteria. And let's go through the part number. SH, spring hinge. The -140, all that conspires to mean single acting spring hinge. 4.5 by 4.5, that's obviously the height. The hinge size. The height is the first dimension, that's 4.5 inch. Not that it really matters so much on a spring hinge that the height is the first dimension, but standard convention means the height is the first dimension. This is a single acting spring hinge. It's non-handed. You can use it on either left hand or right hand doors, doesn't matter. This is full mortise. You can see from the swag on the hinge leaves there that when they're brought parallel, they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame. This is a steel, this is a standard weight hinge. That means that the leaf thickness is 134 thousandths, and that's common for commercial doors that we would call standard weight. There's a heavier weight hinge. This is standard weight at 134 thousandths. That's the magic dimension, and that is by far the most common size. If you're looking for a spring hinge for a 3070 wood door, this is going to be it. Steel based, that means that it's made of steel, certainly, with a satin chrome sort of finish. Cal Royal has this, I had mentioned, in other finishes: your prime coat, polished brass, satin brass, antique brass, as a matter of fact. They can also do this in oil-rubbed bronze, antique bronze, satin bronze as well, and they can do it in 32D, which is satin stainless steel, which means it's a stainless base material as well. Okay. Now, where is this going to be used? Like I said earlier, on a condo building, you've got 20-minute fire-rated doors, hollow metal frames, those entry doors to the individual units. Those are self-closing because it's typical. It's not typical, it's standard. It's required that a fire-rated door be self-closing. In a situation like that, or maybe it's the common area doors in that same condo building, the stairwell doors. I've seen those hung on spring hinges. It's fairly typical to install that, especially the residential application, to install this spring hinge in lieu of a door closer. Seeing hydraulic overhead surface-mounted door closers is a bit unusual in a residential application, so spring hinges are really what is usually adopted for those installations. You'll also see these installed in front doors of multi-purpose sorts of buildings where there's, the door just needs to be self-closing. 3-flat buildings will have a spring hinge on them to keep the front door closed. Very common and typical. This is going to be, of course, in that regard, a UL listed hinge. This would be appropriate for use on those doors that would require a fire-rated piece of hardware. This is what's called template pattern, and that is a reference to the location of the screw holes. There is a link below this video to a document called template. It shows where all these screw holes are located. They are located in what we call the template pattern, okay? So if it is a typical hollow metal door, a wood door, it's very likely that they will be in the template pattern. If there's any concern that you might have regarding matching this template pattern to your existing, by all means refer to that template prior to purchasing and comparing that against your existing installation, rather than just assuming that it's correct. If it's 4.5, that's probably, I can't really think of an instance where it wouldn't be correct, unless, of course, it might be an incredibly old hinge. This hinge is going to be packaged with machine screws and wood screws. Typically, what you're going to get is all machine screws and then half wood screws. That would be common. This hinge has 8 of each, so you're getting all wood screws and all machine screws. But generally, it's half wood. There is also a link below this video to the instructions and usage guide. Now that is, in addition to being available there for you to review prior to purchase or after, it's also printed on the box. Should your order come in a box, and it's likely that it will, but not always, it might come loose, the instructions are also on the box. But if it's not, it's there. Let's go over that now. Instructions and usage guide. So, first of all, usage guide. Bottom area of that link to the instructions and usage guide, and also on this side of the box, you'll see columns there for different hinge sizes. So we're all the way in the right-hand column, the 4.5 by 4.5 inch hinge column. Then you can see the rows that are there for the different door weights. 70 pounds, they want 2 spring hinges. Well, quite frankly, up to 115 pounds, they want 2 spring hinges and a regular ball bearing hinge. Now that's okay to mix and match because they are simply compatible, is the bottom line. The vertical axis of pivoting is compatible with a likewise hinge, meaning it's the same width and it's the same material thickness. Anything other than that, it won't work properly. Now, you can see that they will get you up to 150 pounds and they want all 3 spring hinges. I am personally not a fan of spring hinges to close any door because it's basically a spring, but we'll get into that more in a moment. When installing the spring hinges, put them at the middle and the bottom. The top hinge, if you're using a standard hinge, that should be the ball bearing hinge. That hinge is going to do all the work in terms of hanging the door, and a spring hinge is not load rated. It's not intended to carry the weight of the door. So let that top ball bearing hinge do that work, and then do the closing with your middle and bottom hinge. Okay, I had said earlier, I'm not really a fan of spring hinges, and I'm not, because in my experience, they are unreliable. They're unpredictable. They're not really safe all the time. They are just a spring. When you take that door and you open it, there's nothing but stored energy in there. What happens with the proper installation of this is that you will certainly get the door to close and latch, but you might find it difficult to get that to tailor itself so that it operates quite smoothly. When you have a surface-mounted door closer, you have hydraulic control not only over the sweep area of the closing part of the door cycle, which is generally like 15 to 90 degree, something like that, but also the latch cycle. From 0 to 15 degree, you can usually tailor that individually. With a spring, you don't have any of that control. You just open the door and the stored energy is released, and the door's got to get all the way home. It's got to overcome the weight of the door. It's got to overcome the fact that there is no inertia. It's got to overcome all the air pressure that it encounters on its way closed. It has to overcome the resistance of the latch bolt hitting the strike plate. What you sometimes have to do is turn the tension up so high in the spring, and we'll get to how to set that in a moment, that you get the door moving pretty quick through the opening just so that it can limp home and close and latch. With the changing of seasons, if it's an exterior door, you might find that you have to change those settings because a back door or a rear window in a building during the summer will require different tension on your spring hinges than it would in the winter time. The bottom line, however, is a spring hinge is really a necessary evil because, as I had said earlier, there are just simply applications when it's really not best that you even attempt to install a surface-mounted closer. So they step in and do fill that role. Allowing the spring hinge to do the best possible job that it can, I'm a fan of all spring hinges. The reasoning is this. When you open that door, you're going to store that energy in the spring. When you have more springs rather than less doing the same job, you're asking each one of those individual hinges to share the load better and to do less of the total amount of work per hinge. That means that you're stressing the hinge less. You are allowing yourself to build up more stored energy but more torque, like a tugboat really, in the sense that you have a lot of torque. They don't go very fast, but they can pull a lot of weight. So when you've got additional torque on reserve, because when that door gets to the closed position, there's really no energy left. But when you've got a bit more of that happening, another 50% more, you have a better ability to not force the door to close fast, have it close a bit more controllably, and when it gets down to that latch cycle, the 0 to 15 degree, you've still got enough left in the tank, so to speak, to get the door to latch. Spring hinges are relatively inexpensive, unless your door is a hollow core door and really only one hinge is required. You might, and if it's a commercial grade door where you know it's 110 pounds, you should opt for all 3 spring hinges right from the get-go. You will be able to control that better, even though the word control is not correct with a spring hinge. You'll be able to have better control over the door. Plus, there is a note on the instructions to not exceed 4 holes of tension to get the door to, if the door goes to 90 degrees, don't exceed 4 holes of tension. If you're exceeding that, you are certainly beyond what the hinge can handle. If you hear any creaking in the hinge as you're testing it, and if it's a new hinge, that's likely a telltale sign that there's too much torsion happening on the spring and it's contorting itself a bit. If it's an old hinge, existing hinge, you might, if you hear a creaking sound, it is permissible to get some lubrication in there, because over time there will be a bit of oxidation on the face of on the outside of the spring that's in there. So that's not unusual to be able to lubricate that so you have a good sort of operating situation. Now, choose the quantity of hinges correctly. If you're not sure, opt to the extra one. That's all there is to it. And if you don't, you can always add one later in the future if you find that it doesn't operate correctly. Now, instructions. We did usage guide. Instructions. Hang your door. That's all there is to it. Just get the door hung like any old hinge. Install this tension collar. You see this? There's not one here. Towards the top. Now you can install it towards the bottom. There's no problem with that. But this example is such that every order will come with an Allen wrench. Every hinge will come with a tension pin. The Cal Royal version also features a tension rod. I'm not exactly sure why they have it, but they were probably trying to avoid patents, I would say, on other people's hinges, where they give you an Allen wrench and a tension rod. Here's what I mean. The Allen wrench goes in the top. There's not one down here at the bottom. You insert that Allen wrench and you turn it clockwise, you're going to reveal those new additional holes. It's into one of those new additional holes that you will insert the tension pin. Now this tension rod, you can insert it over here and turn it clockwise and you'll reveal new additional holes. Why they have both systems, it's only my guess that it's some sort of patent maneuvering, would be my guess. It doesn't strike me that you need 2 ways to set the tension on a spring hinge. So you'll turn it clockwise. If you're installing it this way, turn it counterclockwise. That's that simple. Put 1 or 2 pins of tension in there. Test your door operation. You're going to want to do more tension on the middle hinge than the bottom hinge in this sort of event. But you'll be able to tailor both of them so as not to exceed the 4-hole maximum for a 90-degree opening, and no more than 3 holes if your door gets out closer to a 180-degree opening. And then test and then adjust is the bottom line. Experiment with all the hinges in terms of what and where you set them so that it works best for your application. I'd be very appreciative to hear any feedback that you might have on your success with setting the tension. So after the door is hung, set the tension, test, experiment, test again. Final adjustment is when it closes properly. So that's all very, very simple and straightforward. Also, and finally, below this video or some notes. 2 spring hinges is the maximum requirement on fire-rated doors. So what they're saying is, if you have a fire-rated door, the minimum is 2 spring hinges. That's what they're saying. You can have more, but you need at least 2. Weather stripping, extreme window air pressure on one side of the door may require the use of the maximum amount of spring hinges. And as it says there, and in my actual experience, for best results, use all spring hinges. And that's only to allow you to get the job done as efficiently as possible. That concludes going over this hinge. There's really nothing else left here, but except to point out the fact, again, you've got the Cal Royal logo there. You've got the certifications and UL listing here. There is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up the full line Cal Royal catalog and review all things hardware related. Cal Royal is a company that, in my 20 plus years of purchasing from them, has methodically and constantly been increasing their product offering. Their catalog was just tiny 20 years ago, and now they have stuff that is way beyond the original. They've taken one idea and they've carried it out quite extensively with designs, options, finishes, complementary or sister products to the original baseline, lock sets, door closers, exit devices, hinges, builder's hardware, and then a bunch of other stuff. And it's always in that catalog. I should say it's in their always expanding catalog. It seems like every other month I get a new section from some new products that they're rolling out. It's good quality imported hardware. It's very good quality imported hardware. Predictable, reliable lead times, very nice customer service. They're very predictable and reliable folks as well. I cannot give you a single reason why I wouldn't consider Cal Royal on a project. The quality and price ratio for many jobs is just perfectly poised to make everyone not only look good, make a dime, and continue to create long-lasting relationships with your clients. And I've been doing that on the back of Cal Royal for a very long time, and it's a product that I stand behind. If you have any questions on the Cal Royal SH140 in a 26D finish, or any other Cal Royal product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.